day, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. Well, it's Sunday afternoon, and this morning, which would have been Sunday morning, we had a great time online at the Typewriter Club meeting. This is the online meeting that Gregory Short organizes, the poor typist himself, yes. So we had a great time. Today's episode was on the subject of show and tell. And I showed a few doodads, but I also showed some typewriters, several of which are Type Bar electric typewriters. If you might remember the previous video, we covered the Olympia Reporter Type Bar electric that's new to my collection, but I also have the Smith Corona 5 Series electric typewriter, and I thought it might be a fun little comparison today just to talk a little bit about these two Type Bar electrics from several decades apart. Stay tuned. One interesting thing about these two Type Bar electrics is the fact that the size difference seems to be so remarkable. Of course, this is because the Olympia has a 12-inch carriage versus the 9.5-inch wide Smith Corona. And so the Olympia's overall width from carriage knob to carriage knob is roughly 15.5 inches, whereas the Smith Corona's is about 10 3/4 total width. So quite a bit of difference in width. Footprint, of course, being smaller in the case of the Smith Corona right there. So that might be a factor if you're interested in acquiring a Type Bar electric, is the size difference. I know that a number of machines sold in the 60s and 70s, Type Bar electrics, were wider carriage because they were sort of trying to compete with the commercial market for like IBM Selectrics that would be used in offices in the business world. But there were a number of personal-sized Type Bar machines, and I think, though, we'll start with the 5 Series here because, you know, this came out in the 1950s as one of the first real popular Type Bar electrics that was available, right? Of course, there were electric machines available in the early 20th century, but a lot of them were more expensive and oriented toward businesses, and some of them nowadays, a lot of them actually are hard to find. They're quite rare because of the way they were discarded by businesses rather than stashed away in a closet or in an attic by a private person who might have had a personal typewriter. Well, one of the things you might notice about the 5 Series electric is that it really is a 5 Series typewriter. It's really only just a little bit taller than a standard manual 5 Series, but the keyboard layout feels pretty much the same with the exception of some of the keys, some of the critical keys in a different location, like especially noted here is the quote and the apostrophe. Instead of the apostrophe being a shifted 8, it's over here where a more modern keyboard would be. And of course, this is a newer machine, so it has the number 1 and the exclamation mark up here. One thing notable about the 5 Series electric is it does not have a power carriage return, so the entire carriage assembly up here is all standard manual 5 Series. So for instance, the platen is easily removable with the just like in the manual machine with this lever here. You can take out the platen, swap them around. This becomes really handy for me because I have a manual 5 Series machine with a brand new J.J. Short platen, and if I want to put it into this machine, it's really easy to swap it in and out, right? So the paper bale has this really nice finger right here, and this machine is old enough that it also has the paper fingers, like the older Corona styles from the 20s and 30s had, right? It still has that feature. So I'm right now sporting a blue ribbon in this blue machine. And of course, one thing really noticeable about this blue machine is the bright red raised electric model badge here. And when you turn on the machine, the power switch has that lovely red appearance to contrast with the blue. Okay, let's try this. This has, of course, spacebar and hyphen, auto repeat. Everything else is single. But you can type awfully fast on this machine. So it really is a touch typist machine. And the keycaps do articulate in the same way that the manual machine does, in the sense that the key surface stays horizontal throughout its travel. And you'll notice you only have to move it maybe about a little more than a quarter inch before the spindle grabs the linkage and slams it into the paper. So that's a wonderful thing. And of course, power shifting. You barely move the shift key and it completes the shifting, the segment shifting for you, and of course the shift lock and that shift. Manual backspace, manual tabs. So one of the significant differences between the electric and the manual 5 series is the electric has this knob right here, which is the impression control, which is essentially how hard the type slugs hit the paper, hit the ribbon. Whereas underneath the machine right here, about even with the space bar, is the touch control knob. That affects the touch of the machine, how hard or easy it is to touch. One thing that becomes very evident when you turn the machine on is the hum of the motor. Put the microphone next to here. That's off, and this is on. So yeah, you can definitely hear that motor turning. Well, rather than being made in the late 1950s, the Olympia here was made in the early 80s, and it is a Nakajima Japanese-made typewriter. This one's modeled the Reporter. There used to be a Report Deluxe, which was the predecessor to this one. The Report Deluxe was made in Germany, in West Germany. But this machine has a fairly decent quality chassis in an all-plastic enclosure. And I say right up front, of course, this machine is a little louder, mainly because of the resonating quality of the plastic. I did operate the chassis under power when I had it out and I was servicing it, and I thought it was quite a bit quieter, surprisingly, outside of its body than it was inside. Well, let's take a look at it. So you've already seen the video probably on this. It has a mechanical carriage lock as long as the power switch is turned off. So you can't move it. But when you turn it on, that enables you to manually move the carriage. So the carriage has what you might call semi-automatic movement, in the sense that you can press the carriage release button here on the upper right, and you can manually control the carriage this way within the margin limits, and you can use the margin release if you had to release it to go beyond the margins manually. But it also has a powered carriage return, and it's a very vigorous power carriage return. The other thing about this typewriter that maybe differentiates it from the Smith Corona is it not only has a repeat space bar and a repeat hyphen and dash, has a repeat period and a repeat X. And it also has a manual half space feature for half spacing, and it has a powered backspace and a powered tabulator. And you notice it has a quite nice and smooth tab break, whereas the Smith Corona kind of slammed pretty hard if there's no tabs set. And of course, power shifting. It is a segment shift machine like the Smith Corona. As far as the actual speed of operation, it's at least as fast as the Smith Corona. I would almost say it seems like it's even faster. The key travel is about the same, roughly close to 1/4 of an inch before the spindle grabs the linkage underneath. It does not have an impression control or a touch control, however, but it seems to be preset to work pretty well on the kind of paper that I use it on. It does have a correction feature, which is if you're using the ribbon with a bottom edge as the white correction feature, you can press this button and it simply manually moves the ribbon up to the lower edge without advancing the carriage. So you basically press and hold this button while you retype your errant word or letter to correct it if you're using the white bottom-edged correction ribbon, which I do not recommend using. They gum up the machine with all the white residue. So There you go. It's a wider machine. It's a little heavier. It's a little louder, mainly because of the resonating quality of the plastic body, but also because it hits the platen pretty hard. So it is a little louder, but I also think it's faster operating. It has the same exact layout of keyboard, essentially, though, as far as all the symbols and letters. Everything is in the same exact place as it would be on the 5 Series electric Smith Corona. Maybe one other significant difference between this and the Smith Corona is this has a half line spacing feature. So you can put it on 1.5 line spacing here, whereas the Smith Corona has 1, 2, and 3 line spacing, which is whole line spacing. This has half line spacing, which is good for superscripts and subscripts. Also, of course, this is approximately a 12-inch platen instead of the 9.5 of the smaller 5 Series, so you can obviously put in wider paper into it, similar to the 6 Series Smith Corona electrics that came out later. Now, as far as the sound of the motor, I'm going to take the microphone off here, and we'll place it next to close where the motor is. So that's turned off, and that's turned on. To my ears, this machine sounds quieter than the Smith Corona. At least the motor turning sounds quieter when it's sitting at idle. Well, let's see if we can weigh these on my old ancient 1950s bathroom scale. So it's about 16.5 pounds for the Olympia, whereas the Smith Corona, let me get balanced on here, it's about 17.5. So the Smith Corona looks like it weighs about a pound more than the Olympia, which is surprising. I kind of thought it was the other way around. With a comparison like this, it obviously comes down to the question of, if you're looking for an electric typewriter machine and you had to choose between these two models, which one would you select? Well, that's a good question. So they both have carrying cases. The Smith Corona's is smaller, but it's a heavier machine. The Olympia's is, of course, slightly larger carrying case, a slightly larger machine, but a little bit lighter in weight. I think the Olympia is a little bit faster of a typing machine. It has a few more features, especially the auto repeat for the X and the period, as well as the dash, hyphen, and space bar. The Olympia has the half line space feature, the Smith Corona doesn't. And maybe perhaps one of the biggest comparison differences is that the Olympia will be about 20 plus years newer than the Smith Corona. They came out, Smith Corona's electrics came out in 1957, whereas these Olympias came out in the early 80s. So it's an interesting point, right, that you might be dealing with a newer typewriter with fewer age-related issues with the Olympia. However, having said that, some of the age-related issues with typewriters have to do with the aging of their rubber parts, especially the platen roller. And on the 5 Series electric, you can replace the platen roller by easily just pop it out. It's designed for the user to pull it out, and that means you could ship it off to a place like J.J. Short and get it resurfaced with rubber. Whereas machines like the Olympia and most others, it takes some mechanical skill to disassemble the carriage to get the platen roller out. So that's another difference. But I think overall, the Olympia feels more like the keyboard you would expect on like an IBM Selectric or an older computer. Just that style of key, the touch, and the layout. Whereas the Smith Corona definitely feels like a mid-century 5 Series machine. I think as far as styling, though, yeah, it's hard to beat the Smith Corona, that mid-century styling, especially if you have a color like the blue one that I have with the red power button and the red electric logo. Those are really hard to beat, but again, it's an older machine. The motor's older, the belts are older, etc., etc. So, I think both of these machines are great if you want a Type Bar electric. And this brings to mind the point of, why would you select a Type Bar electric over, let's say, a daisy wheel typewriter or even something like an IBM Selectric? Well, certainly the Type Bar electrics have the limitation that you only have a single typeface, a single font style, so to speak, right? You cannot change them out. Whereas with daisy wheel and Selectrics, you have type elements or wheels that can be replaced. So if that's important to you, you might want to look at one of those kinds of typewriters. However, when I was over at my friend Kevin's last week, with the Olympia. He had his 5 Series electric Smith Corona. Between that and the Wheelwriter, the IBM Wheelwriter, which is a daisy wheel style machine, comparing all 3 of these machines is that the Type Bar electrics have a faster response. The time between pressing the key and when the letter gets printed, there's less of a delay, really hardly not noticeable at all with a Type Bar electric, right? It seems instantaneous. Whereas even with the fastest daisy wheel, like the Wheelwriters, there is still a noticeable but slight delay there, and that might bother you. I think speed of operation, the Type Bar electrics are really hard to beat as far as responsiveness. Again, the downside, you can't swap out typefaces, right? And this video wasn't really a comparison at all with the Selectrics, but I did mention the IBM Selectric. One of the things about the Selectrics is they're very heavy and they're big. Even the personal size Selectric, which are not that common, were still big and heavy machines. And most daisy wheel machines have a big footprint, bigger than the Reporter here, the Olympia. Type Bar electric typewriters are generally going to be using a cloth 1/2-inch ribbon, which gets used over and over. It auto reverses, it uses over and over, and it fails gracefully, meaning that the ribbon just slowly gets fainter and fainter, just like with a manual typewriter ribbon. Whereas the carbon film ribbons on the daisy wheels and the IBM Selectrics are all single-use only ribbons. Now, it's true that in the case of the Selectrics, the IBM branded cartridges had a lot of ribbon in them. It was a very, very thin plastic film, and they wound it or wrapped it in there very, very tightly. So you had a lot of ribbon. But some of the aftermarket branded ribbons for the Selectrics, they don't have nearly as much ribbon in them anymore, so they're not nearly as thrifty. So I think in some ways you'll find the cloth ribbon Type Bar electrics are just in general pretty thrifty with ribbons and just easy to get ribbons for, and that's one of the advantages of them. One thing I noticed about my typewriter collecting and usage, and I did mention this morning, because of the COVID situation in the year 2020, I haven't been going out to coffee shops hardly at all, especially with typewriters. And so my former fascination with ultra portables is, it's not that I don't like them, it's just that they don't have the preeminence or the dominance in my interests as they used to. And so I'm more interested now in looking at other kinds of typewriters, the kind of typewriter that you might use when you stay home, for instance, because a lot of us are staying home more. And I think part of this is why I've gravitated toward these Type Bar electrics. And so I find it an interesting evolution in my interest in collecting and in usage of typewriters. And so I encourage you guys, be open-minded and maybe consider a Type Bar electric, especially if you are a prolific writer and you want to put down lots of words on paper. If you are a fast touch typist on a computer keyboard, you'll find that you can type really fast on a Type Bar electric, and you don't have the same finger strength, hand strength problems that a lot of us computer typists have when we go back to manual typewriters and find that our minor fingers just aren't strong as they need to be in order to be a rapid touch typist on a manual typewriter. The Type Bar electrics are sort of the best of both worlds in that regards. I know for myself, as far as deciding which of the two machines to choose, it's a pretty easy choice. I choose both. Why not have both? All right, well, I'd love to hear your comments down below about Type Bar electrics and about the comparison between these two machines that are 20-something years apart in age. Leave a comment down below. I'd love to have a dialogue with you guys. And, of course, as always, stay well, stay healthy, stay happy, and stay creative. And until next time, have yourselves a great day. Bye-bye for now.